Hello and welcome to week 3 of Introduction to Korean History. I hope you are able to keep up with the reading so far, whether it's in the books that we assigned in the syllabus or in your own history of Korea that you may have. The important thing is to cover the content of these periods. And so now in week 3, we enter what is known as the Three Kingdoms period of Korean history. Now, it could easily be a joke in Korean history. How many kingdoms were there in Korea during the Three Kingdoms period? It sounds quite ridiculous. And yet, if you would go with the obvious answer, three kingdoms, that would be the least correct option, at least most of the time. Out of 350 years of this period, from Goguryeo destruction of the Lelang commandery all the way to Silla's consolidation of the three kingdoms into one, out of 350 years of this period, there was only about a century where you could even loosely claim that there were only three kingdoms on the Korean peninsula. And in fact, if you counted every single ruler of a Korean city-state who claimed himself or herself to be a king or a queen, you might call it the dozens of kingdoms period or even the 100 kingdoms period of Korean history. It can be quite confusing, and especially from there, you can add in the fact that at almost every major battle during this period, there were Chinese armies or Japanese mercenaries or some other group that didn't belong on the peninsula present on the battlefield at most of the conflicts that took place during the Three Kingdoms period. It can be very confusing. I hope the timeline that I have included with this week will help a little bit in relaxing some of the stress level that reading about this period might cause for you. But then the question is, why would historians call this the Three Kingdoms period of Korean history if that was rarely the number of kingdoms present during the period? Well, there are historical and political reasons for calling this the Three Kingdoms period. One of the reasons has to do with China. China had its own Three Kingdoms period in Chinese history that started and ended a century or so earlier than the so-called Three Kingdoms period of Korean history. So maybe keeping up with Big Brother once again may be a theme that pops up in this situation. And most of the knowledge that we have about the Three Kingdoms period actually comes from what is called the Samguk Yusa, or Memorabilia of the Three Kingdoms. It was a history book that was compiled by the Buddhist monk Il Yun in 1281 CE or AD, which, yes, is nearly 1,000 years after most of the events that he's writing about took place. So it may be that we call this the Three Kingdoms period because that's what he called it. That may be one of the reasons. But maybe we should think of this period as the exploits of the three main kingdoms in Korean history, because the three principal kingdoms were the ones attempting to build their own empires, forge their own coalitions, engage in conflicts and alliances with each other and other kingdoms as well. For most of the period, the kingdoms of Goguryeo and Silla and Baekje maintained a stable balance of power with each other. This period is important because distinctly Korean culture and philosophy and religious elements, as well as language and writing, begin to take shape during this period. These kingdoms were often at war with each other, and yet they shared a common language and heritage that none of them would deny. The Three Kingdoms period also has a strong influence over contemporary Korean identity, especially in the modern Republic of Korea, or as many of us call South Korea. For example, Seoul was once called Wiriesong and was the capital of Baekje for part of its history. The tourist city of Gyeongju, former capital of Silla, is considered one of the world's largest open-air museums for the sheer quantity of historical monuments and resources that are present there that you can go around and see even today from the Silla period of the Three Kingdoms. Of course, the black sheep of the period was Gaya, a federation of city-states in the far south of Korea. Though it kept a very low profile in the conflicts that racked the peninsula during this period, Gaya thrived on sea trade between the islands of Japan, the Korean peninsula, and the Chinese mainland. And historians have recently discovered that the Gaian trade network was part of a network of sea trade that reached as far as India, Arabia, Egypt, and even linked up with the Mediterranean world. Very important events in this period of the Three Kingdoms. While you're digging into the period, don't miss a couple of the rock stars of Korean history that lived during this period. King Gwangaeto of Goguryeo, who helped conquer and solidify the largest empire that East Asia had ever seen up until that time. And of course, Queen Sondok of Silla, who was one of, I believe, the second female solo ruler in East Asian history up until that point. Both of them have had very excellent historical dramas made about their lives and exploits, and I would encourage you to take a look at those as well, as they can shed a lot of light on this important period of Korean history that we are trying to understand. So I hope all goes well with your reading and with your studies, and keep up the reading and do some research on your papers. Maybe write some little outlines out. Think about how you're going to attack both the midterm paper and the primary source review. Thanks a lot. See you soon.